Hello.
Hello.
Happy Hobbit Day.
Happy Hobbit Day. Happy Hobbit Day.
Oh, am I getting echo? I feel like I
Oh, am I
am.
getting
I gotta
echo? I feel
make
like
sure
I
my
am.
speakers are muted. How about now? How's the sound? Am I echoing? I see Ericer, Farmouse, and Robot Keo in the stream. How's everybody on this fine Wednesday? Farmouse says, hello, happy Hobbit Day to all. I'm, oh, Ericer says, happy birthday, Bilbo. Yeah, that's right. I would also say happy birthday, Frodo, but where we're at, he hasn't been born yet, so. But when he is, it is apparently the same day. How's the sound, Ericer? Am I echoing at all? The Bill birthday, says Robakio. Yeah. Interesting note. Let me see if I can find that in the beginning of my book here. It doesn't actually give the precise date. It says first published in Great Britain by George Allen in Unwin 1937. But I was reading a thing that said no echoes. Okay, good. I was reading a thing that said that it was first published on yesterday, like on the 21st of September. Um, so if that's accurate, then yesterday was the published date, and today is the Bilbo birthday, and Frodo eventually. I'm pretty sure that was the Hobbit, anyways. So is anyone doing anything to celebrate other than just tuning in? Do you guys have cakes or snacks? I hope you've got snacks. I think it's very important to have snacks for Bilbo's birthday. Do sound rather quiet on Robot Keo's end. Um, Let me take a look. Well, my microphone is turned up. The gain is turned up as loud as I can, but I can move it closer to myself. Should be using the correct input. Erica realizing she should get snacks. Yes, that's right. Now, the Sharkies said that they would be a few minutes late. Some troubles they are dealing with. But you'd have to leave Kitty alone. I think Kitty would forgive you as long as Kitty also gets snacks. I think that's an important balance. You can come say hi if you want to. You don't have to come bearing cakes. Farmhouse is being all squirrely today.
It's not cake time.
Yeah, you can still come say hi. No, not gonna come say hi yet. Farmhouse will come say hi later. She's being bashful even though it's only people we know in here. And that's the wrong series of dwarves, bashful. Haha, bad joke. It's not cake time. Erica has snacks. Oh, you. That's right. Does Robot Keo have snacks? Kitty was disturbed. Oh no. You must compensate Kitty with snacks. You ran out of snacks? You're snackless on Bilbo's birthday? On Bill birthday? That is... I don't know about that. That's no good. The tragedy. Any day but today. Rowboat. Any day but today. So, for those of you that did not join us on Monday, we only read we read a very small amount. I think we read, let's see, from page 329 to 336. So not even 10 pages, because we were getting to some exciting stuff, and I thought, let's just save it all for Wednesday. Let's do that when there's more people here, because it was only really the Sharkies and Parmos and I think, on Monday. So let's save that for today. We'll do a little bit of a longer chapter today, or longer reading. We'll finish the book, and then on Friday we'll talk about what to read next, and maybe I'll figure out how to put up a poll, and we'll do a little vote on what book to read next. So I'll try and have all of the different options with me here, but that might mean I'm going to have to do a drive out to Chilliwack, because I had lent one of the options to Mike. So I'm going to have to come and get that from you guys, if that's all right. So that I can have it here for Friday. If that's all right for me to come and get that. And I'm going to have to figure out a new outfit, I think, because this is kind of my Hobbit outfit that I've been wearing. I don't know if that's been apparent or not, but this was supposed to be sort of my Hobbitish, comfortable, and yet still presentable clothes. Parmo says, yeah, depending on the book. Yeah. Erica says, that's fine, we'll talk. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm going to need to find... It is, I think, going to have to depend somewhat on what we read next, but I think I'll have to find an outfit that matches. Robot Kyo likes the dapper look, hobbitish or not. Well, thank you. Yeah, I don't know. I enjoy this look, but also I've been wearing it twice a week for 2 months now, so I think it's high time to change things up. Who knows, maybe I'll shave too. This is kind of getting a little shaggy. I set the lights to gold, but I feel like they're not quite bright enough. What's a good color for the lights for today? Because I think it's going to be a little difficult to read by this light. It's a little dark. Let me think. No Sharkies yet. Hey Google, set computer lights to pale green.
Sorry, I don't know how to help with that.
What?
Here are other things you can try.
Google doesn't know how to help with that. Did you just not understand? Hey Google, set computer lights to pale green.
Sorry, I
No,
don't know how to help
doesn't
with
know
that.
pale green.
Here
That's
are other
weird.
things you can try.
All right. Hey Google, set computer lights to light green. Oh, there we go.
Changing 10 lights to light green.
I don't know that that's much better. Maybe a little though. I feel like I'm not squinting as much in this light. The Sharkies are here, hooray! Having an interesting evening. Yeah, I heard a little bit. I hope it's not completely terrible. Happy Bill birthday. Yeah, happy Hobbit day. We were just talking about that a little bit, of course. So is everything okay? Are you guys going to be able to stick around for finishing up the book? For Bilbo's birthday? Do you have snacks? Is the most important question. As you wait for the bus, oh dear. Oh, all right. Well, thank you for checking in. That's doesn't sound ideal. Was going to make biscuits, though not very cram-like. I should hope not. If you're gonna make biscuits, you might as well enjoy them. Farmmouse has been waiting patiently to bring out cake. I thought we would wait at least until you guys were here. Erica's snacks are not cram. I think it's probably not encouraged to have cram for Bilbo's birthday. He hasn't exactly ever spoken fondly of it, so, you know, that's what Bilbo Baggins hates. Cram. Well, I don't know. What do you guys think? Should I... Oh, Robot Kyo will make some pancakes. That sounds good. Pancakes, you know, cake is in the name. I think cakes are probably the most thematic thing to have for Bilbo's birthday. Any kind of cake, I think, is on point for that. And I think, yeah, it's cake adjacent. That's right. So I think pancakes count. Well, hopefully you can hear from the kitchen, because I think I should probably start reading since we've got a good amount to get through tonight. Nearly had bacon at home too. Oh, and Erica bought pumpkin butter. When I first glanced at it, I thought you were going to be saying pancake batter, but no, you said pumpkin butter. It sounds similar and it looks similar. It's not the same though. The missus and the kids are getting a ride home. Erica wants pumpkin butter on pancake batter, but the batter cooked. Yes. You need to get pumpkin butter and pancake batter, then you cook one of them and you put the other on it, and don't get mixed up which one's which. That does sound pretty tasty though, and you know, you got to put butter on your pancakes, so it might as well be pumpkin butter. That's pretty interesting sounding. All right, well, Robot Kyo has a wireless headset coming with you wherever you go. Surfing doggy. Surfing doggy, surfing doggy. Car stopped dead in front of the library. It's basically pumpkin puree, sugar, and spices. Interesting. Well, I guess there's worse places for the car to stop dead. That sucks though. I hope it doesn't end up being too expensive. Robot Kyo has been to the library. It's okay. The books are free there. Yeah. Robot Kyo has also had a car breakdown. Yeah. Yeah, it's not a fun thing. All right. I need to get started on this because we are on page 337. So we've got just under 30 pages to get through, I think, which is not that much. We're going to be finished with The Hobbit tonight. That's kind of weird, isn't it? Should be okay. I hope so. I don't know. Hopefully you've got everything under control, but if you need any help, let me know. I will do what I can. Okay. So I think what I'm going to do is reread the page that we were on because that kind of set things up. But also let's see if I can... I don't know if this light's going to be good for the picture for this chapter, but it's kind of a nice one. No, it doesn't want to... Oh, there we go. Chapter 17, The Clouds Burst. Look at that. Lots of warlike people and dwarves of varying levels of grimness. So hopefully you can make some of that out. It is kind of a busy image, but I really like this one guy down here in the corner. This guy here. Look at that. Look at that guy. He's like, whoa! Bonus Grim points. Someone mentioned Grim yesterday at school. Made you think of Bard. That's funny. Alright, so where we were at, the dwarves of the Iron Hills, I believe, Dane's company, were just arriving. They had marched through the night in order to make it to the mountain. And so the elves and men were somewhat surprised to see them. And they came over and were like, hey, let us into the mountain. And the elves and the men were like, no, I don't think so. Which is good for them because if the dwarves had gone to the mountain, they weren't about ready to give up any of the gold, even though Thorin had agreed to exchange 1/14 share of the gold and silver for the Arkenstone of Thrain, which Bilbo had delivered to the elves and men, to Bard and the Elven King. And Thorin was very unhappy with Bilbo for that, and kicked them out of the mountain, and cut off ties of friendship, essentially. You know, not so grateful the dwarves are right now. And we were kind of discussing how this is not the dwarves' most appealing moment. I don't know. They don't seem like very good folk at this point. And so while the elves and the men were discussing how to communicate with the dwarves after telling them no, they couldn't go to the mountain, the dwarves got ready to attack them. And that's where we're at right now. Suddenly, without a signal, they sprang silently forward to attack. The dwarves, this is. Bows twanged and arrows whistled. Battle was about to be joined. Still more suddenly, a darkness came on with dreadful swiftness. A black cloud hurried over the sky. Winter thunder on a wild wind rolled roaring up and rumbled in the mountain, and lightning lit its peak. And beneath the thunder another blackness could be seen whirling forward, but it did not come with the wind. It came from the north, like a vast cloud of birds, so dense that no light could be seen between their wings. "Halt!" cried Gandalf, who appeared suddenly, and stood alone with arms uplifted, between the advancing dwarves and the ranks awaiting them. "Halt!" he called, in a voice like thunder. I don't know how thunder like my voice sounds there. And his staff blazed forth with a flash like the lightning. "Dread has come upon you all! Alas, it has come more swiftly than I guessed. The goblins are upon you! Bolg of the north is coming, O Dane, whose father you slew in Moria. Behold! The bats are above his army like a sea of locusts. They ride upon wolves, and wargs are in their train. There's a footnote after Bolg here that says, son of Azog, see page 40. I think that's the only footnote there's been in this book. Amazement and confusion fell upon them all. Even as Gandalf had been speaking, the darkness grew. The dwarves halted and gazed at the sky. The elves cried out with many voices. Come, called Gandalf. There is yet time for counsel. Let Dane, son of Nain, come swiftly to us. Right. That's another thing that we were talking about. Apparently Dane's father was Nain, and guessing by his relationship to Thorin, I would guess that Nain's father was probably Thrain. So, on that side of the family, apparently it went Thrain, Nain, Dane. That's some creative naming right there, in my opinion. Moria referenced. Yep, Moria. This isn't the first time Moria has been mentioned, I think. Can't complain. Can't complain about Thrain, Nain, Dane. Womp womp. That's just like me. I am Barbara, child of Barbara. Yeah. Well, oh boy. Maybe they wanted to avoid the thirds going on. Thrain the Third. No, this isn't Thrain the Third. This is Dane, son of Nain, son of Thrain. Oh boy. Alright, so that's actually where we finished on Monday. So now we're caught up. I just thought that little bit of context was important for where we're at now. The naming game. The naming game. Thrain, Nain, Dane. Thrain the Third. Sure to be Thrain the Turd. What? What's going on there, Sharkies? Come on. That's nonsense. Alright. So began a battle that none had expected. Well, it says none had expected, but it kind of sounds like Gandalf might have expected it at least a little. My son, Jongwater. Oh boy. So began a battle that none had expected, and it was called the Battle of Five Armies, and it was very terrible. Upon one side were the goblins and the wild wolves, and upon the other were elves and men and dwarves. This is how it fell out. Ever since the fall of the great goblin of the Misty Mountains, the hatred of their race for the dwarves had been rekindled to fury. Messengers had passed to and fro between all their cities, colonies, and strongholds, for they resolved now to win the dominion of the north. Tidings they had gathered in secret ways, and in all the mountains there was a forging and an arming. Then they marched, and gathered by hill and valley, going ever by tunnel or under dark, until around and beneath the great mountain Gundabad of the north, where was their capital, a vast horde was assembled, ready to sweep down in time of storm unawares upon the south. Then they learnt of the death of Smaug, and joy was in their hearts, and they hastened night after night through the mountains, and came thus at last on a sudden from the came thus at last on a sudden from the north, hard on the heels of Dane. Not even the ravens knew of their coming until they came out in the broken lands, which divided the lonely mountain from the hills behind. How much Gandalf knew cannot be said. Oh, okay, there we go. But it is plain that he had not expected this sudden assault. Well, that answers what I was saying before. I feel like that happens occasionally in this book. John the First, son, soon sure to be John the Worst. Disney Robin Hood reference, Sharkies. I gotcha. Farmos, huh? I always thought that the wargs and goblins counted as the same army in terms of the five. Yeah, usually I don't count goblins as and wolves as two factions of the five. I usually count, I think, the eagles as one of the factions, which I did not count here. This is the plan that he made in council with the Elven King and with Bard, and with Dane, for the Dwarf Lord now joined them. The goblins were the foes of all, and at their coming, all other quarrels were forgotten. That's good. Their only hope was to lure the goblins into the valley between the arms of the mountain, and themselves to man the great spurs that struck south and east. Yet this would be perilous if the goblins were in sufficient numbers to overrun the mountain itself, and so attack them also from behind and above. But there was no time to make any other plan, or to summon any help. Soon the thunder passed, rolling away to the southeast, but the bat cloud came, flying lower over the shoulder of the mountain, and whirled above them, shutting out the light and filling them with dread. "To the mountain!" called Bard. "To the mountain! Let us take our places while there is yet time!" On the southern spur, in its lower slopes, and in the rocks at its feet, the elves were set. On the eastern spur were men and dwarves. But Bard and some of the nimblest of men and elves climbed to the height of the eastern shoulder to gain a view to the north. Soon they could see the lands before the mountain's feet, black with the hurrying multitude. Ere long, the vanguard swirled round the spur's end and came rushing into Dale. These were the swiftest wolf riders, and already their cries and howls rent the air afar. A few brave men were strung before them to make a feint of resistance, and many there fell before the rest drew back and fled to either side. As Gandalf had hoped, the goblin army had gathered behind the resisted vanguard, and poured now in rage into the valley, driving wildly up between the arms of the mountain, seeking for the foe. Their banners were countless, black and red, and they came on like a tide in fury and disorder. It was a terrible battle, the most dreadful of all Bilbo's experiences, and the one which at the time he hated most, which is to say, it was the one he was most proud of and most fond of recalling long afterwards, although he was quite unimportant in it. Actually, I may say, he put on his ring early in the business and vanished from sight, if not from all danger. A magic ring of that sort is not a complete protection in a goblin charge, nor does it stop flying arrows and wild spears. But it does help in getting out of the way, and it prevents your head from being specially chosen for a sweeping stroke by a goblin swordsman. That's an interesting paragraph, the bit about he hated it the most at the time, which is to say it was the one he was most proud of and most fond of recalling long afterwards. That's a strange little comparison. Sharky say Gundabad is also in the War in the North game. Oh yeah. Farmos doesn't know if they're here. Internet confirms goblins, wargs, elves, men, and dwarves. Oh, yes. Yeah, the eagles. Bad? Sharky, I do not know what you're saying there. Bad Tito B question mark. Oops, walking and texting. Okay. I was definitely just kind of like, I need to puzzle this out because I do not understand. All right. The elves were the first to charge, I suppose, on the other side of the force. Their hatred for the goblins is cold and bitter. Their spears and swords shone in the gloom with a gleam of chill flame, so deadly was the wrath of the hands that held them. As soon as the host of their enemies was dense in the valley, They sent against it a shower of arrows, and each flickered as it fled as if with stinging fire. Behind the arrows, 1,000 of their spearmen leapt down and charged. The yells were deafening. The rocks were stained black with goblin blood. Just as the goblins were recovering from the onslaught and the elf charge was halted, there rose from across the valley a deep-throated roar, with cries of "Moria!" and "Dane! Dane!" The dwarves of the Iron Hills plunged in, wielding their mattocks. Upon the other side, and beside them, came the men of the lake with long swords. Panic came upon the goblins, and even as they turned to meet this new attack, the elves charged again, with renewed numbers. Already many of the goblins were flying back down the river to escape from the trap, and many of their own wolves were turning upon them and rending the dead and the wounded. Victory seemed at hand, when a cry rang out on the heights above. Goblins had scaled the mountain from the other side, and already many were on the slopes above the gate, and others were streaming down recklessly, heedless of those that fell screaming from cliff and precipice, to attack the spurs from above. Each of these could be reached by paths that ran down from the main mass of the mountain in the center, and the defenders had too few to bar the way for long. Victory now vanished from hope. They had only stemmed the first onslaught of the black tide. Day drew on. The goblins gathered again in the valley. There a host of wargs came ravening, and with them came the bodyguard of Bolg, goblins of huge size, with scimitars of steel. Soon actual darkness was coming into a stormy sky, while still the great bats swirled about the heads and ears of elves and men, or fastened vampire-like on the stricken. Does that mean there's vampires in Middle-earth, I wonder? Or is that just for our sake? Now, Bard was fighting to defend the eastern spur, and yet giving slowly back. And the elf lords were at bay about their king upon the southern arm, near to the watchpost on Ravenhill. Suddenly, there was a great shout, and from the gate came a trumpet call. They had forgotten Thorin. Part of the wall, moved by levers, fell outward with a crash into the pool. Out leapt the king under the mountain, and his companions followed him. Hood and cloak were gone. They were in shining armor, and red light leapt from their eyes. In the gloom, the great dwarf gleamed like gold in a dying fire. Rocks were hurled down from on high by the goblins above, but they held on, leapt down to the fall's foot, and rushed forward to battle. Wolf and rider fell or fled before them. Thorin wielded his axe with mighty strokes, and nothing seemed to harm him. "To me! To me! Elves and men, to me! Oh, my kinsfolk!" he cried, and his voice shook like a horn in the valley. Down, heedless of order, rushed all the dwarves of Dane to his help. Down, too, came many of the lakemen, for Bard could not restrain them, and out upon the other side came many of the spearmen of the elves. Once again the goblins were stricken in the valley, and they were piled in heaps till Dale was dark and hideous with their corpses. The wargs were scattered, and Thorin drove right against the bodyguard of Bolg, but he could not pierce their ranks. Already behind him among the goblin dead lay many men and many dwarves, and many a fair elf that should have lived yet long ages merrily in the wood. And as the valley widened, his onset grew ever slower. His numbers were too few. His flanks were unguarded. Soon the attackers were attacked, and they were forced into a great ring, facing every way, hemmed all about with goblins and wolves returning to the assault. The bodyguard of Bolg came howling against them, and drove in upon their ranks like waves upon cliffs of sand. Their friends could not help them, for the assault from the mountain was renewed with redoubled force, and upon either side men and elves were being slowly beaten down. On all this Bilbo looked with misery. he had taken his stand on Ravenhill among the elves, partly because there was more chance of escape from that point, and partly, with the more tookish part of his mind, because if he was going to be in a last desperate stand, he preferred on the whole to defend the Elven King. That's interesting. Gandalf, too, I must say, was there, sitting on the ground as if in deep thought, preparing, I suppose, some last blast of magic before the end. That did not seem far off. It will not be long now, thought Bilbo, before the goblins win the gate, and we are all slaughtered or driven down and captured. Really, it is enough to make one weep, after all one has gone through. I would rather old Smaug had been left with all the wretched treasure, than that these vile creatures should get it. And poor old Bombur and Balin and Fili and Kili and all the rest come to a bad end. And Bard, too, and the Lakemen and the merry elves. Misery me. I have heard songs of many battles, and I have always understood that defeat may be glorious. It seems very uncomfortable, not to say distressing. I wish I was well out of it. The clouds were torn by the wind, and a red sunset slashed the west. Seeing the sudden gleam in the gloom, Bilbo looked round. He gave a great cry. He had seen a sight that made his heart leap, dark shapes, small yet majestic, against the distant glow. "The eagles! The eagles!" he shouted. "The eagles are coming!" See, there we have it, the eagles. Bilbo's eyes were seldom wrong. The eagles were coming down the wind, line after line, in such a host as must have gathered from all the eyries of the north. I feel like I went over this, whether it was eyries or eries. "The eagles! The eagles!" Bilbo cried, dancing and waving his arms. If the elves could not see him, they could hear him. Soon they too took up the cry, and it echoed across the valley. Many wondering eyes looked up, though as yet nothing could be seen except from the southern shoulders of the mountain. "The eagles!" cried Bilbo once more. But at that moment, a stone, hurtling from above, smote heavily on his helm, and he fell with a crash, and knew no more. Alright, I've definitely missed some chat here. Let's see. See, Farmos, the eagles were there. I was right. Farmos said, elf swords glowing in front of goblins again? Yeah. Sharkies say, a bad experience can make a good story. Oh, okay. That's what bad Tito B question mark meant? Is a bad experience can make a good story? That could be a saying. Bad Tito B question. The Sharkies, like Mia said as we went out to get A&W, at least something interesting happened. Farmos says, wise girl. Giant bats, at least. Sharky says, it also echoed across the cell phones as you came back from the bus. Alright, so that's the end of chapter 17. Let's see whether we can get this picture for chapter 18, which is your sort of after battle type of image. It's focusing a little. Basically, we've got a sort of a vague mound of something with a banner stabbed into it and swords and various weapons left in the ground. I don't know whether you can exactly make out the details of what are in that heap, but I think it's a pretty good guess. And then there's some birds flying past in the background, though they don't look like eagles. They look more like doves to me. Hey Google, set computer lights to warm white.
Got it. Changing 10 lights to warm white.
There was a delay, so we heard you say the eagles at least 4 times. Well, Bilbo does shout about the eagles many times. So I'm pretty sure I said it more than 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. I actually said it 6 times, so you did not hear enough. All right, let's see if that light change makes a difference for the focus. Maybe I need to get a light on the other side of the camera here for this kind of thing. Oh, there we go. Hey, focused. Chapter 18, The Return Journey. Doesn't look like an image representing a return journey. You can see the birds there. Like I said, they kind of look like doves. Yeah, a bit of a grim image is right. Oh, you may have heard me 7 times then. Oh boy. Grimmage. Well, it doesn't look like Bard to me. Oh boy. What do you think, Farm Mouse? Is it cake time yet? No, I'm leaving it up to you. Mm-hmm. We're going to have some cake to celebrate Bilbo's birthday and Hobbit Day and us reaching the end of this book. We're not quite at the very end yet, but we'll get there tonight. We are now on page 344 out of 365, so 21 pages left, people. 21 pages of The Hobbit left. It's going to be kind of sad to be done. I mean, I know we're going to be going on to another book, but you're going to come around, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know.
I'm going to show everybody the cake.
Oh.
Cake.
You think you need to crouch a little?
Me. Hello.
Yeah, it's over here. Oh, a puppy. Give me a pen.
Puppy. A puppy.
Guest appearances. Cake. Farmhouse. Dressed up. Yeah, she's in her Hobbit outfit.
Okay. Okay, I go now.
Oh, she
Now
waved,
I eat
but you couldn't see.
Bye-bye.
I have cakes. A variety of cakes. Give you a close-up view of my cakes. Ooh. We got some kind of cheesecake and some sort of tea cakes that, all various things. They're not seed cakes, I don't think, but they're close. They're definitely not cram, that's for sure. Oh, Puppy really wants my cakes. Look, he's like, he never comes visit, and now, oh, off he goes. He ran off. I don't know if you could have seen that. Alright, so now I am going... Oh, and Robot Kyo just finished his pancakes. Cakes for everybody, except for Ericer. Hi, Puppy. Bye, Puppy. I love how he like stands there looking over his shoulder, like showing everyone his butt, being like, "Are you gonna give me food or should I leave?" Oh, pup. Biscuits are gonna be late for a Sharky. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry you had a rough evening. Alright, I've got a little table here for my cakes. And we'll see. Oh, also, I forgot to point out, but we have a new addition on this side. I'm always pointing to the wrong side. Wait for, yeah, right up at the top here. Right here. There it is. I can probably show it on my phone, because I've already put it up on the wall and it's kind of hard to see there. But that is Mia's rendition of the Arkenstone of Thrain. Glowing in the dark when Bilbo first finds it. Turn up the brightness on my phone. So you can see it's dark all around. There we go. But the Arkenstone is glowing in the dark with rainbow and gold light. So this is supposed to be when Bilbo first found the Arkenstone. So not very much light to go by, which is why it's surrounded by darkness. Oh, and now I'm all out of focus after that. Let's see if I can bring the focus back. Sometimes this works. Back here, folks. Hey, there we go. Alright, I'm gonna have a bite of cake. Everybody gets to watch me eat cake. Ow. Cheesecake. What's this swirl on top of the cake? Strawberry. And a bite of one of the seed cakes substitutes. Those are good too. Very moist, but more solid than I was expecting them to be. They looked very spongy, but they actually are somewhat solid. Erica is delivering compliments for Mia. It's cool, neat that she made that. Rad. Erica loves it. Live streaming cake eating. It's a party. It's a celebration. Gotta have cake. Alright. Happy birthday, Bilbo Baggins. And, 50 years, well, not really. 10 years from now, happy birthday, Frodo Baggins. Alright. Chapter 18, The Return Journey. Here we go, folk. We've only got 2 chapters left to go. When Bilbo came to himself, he was literally by himself. He was lying on the flat stones of Ravenhill, and no one was near. A cloudless day, but cold, was broad above him. He was shaking, and as chilled as stone, but his head burnt with fire. Now, I wonder what has happened, he said to himself. At any rate, I am not yet one of the fallen heroes, but I suppose there is still time enough for that. He sat up, painfully. Looking into the valley, he could see no living goblins. After a while, his head cleared a little. He thought he could see elves moving in the rocks below. He rubbed his eyes. Surely there was a camp still on the plain some distance off, and there was a coming and going about the gate? Dwarves seemed to be busy removing the wall, but all was deadly still. There was no call, and no echo of a song. Sorrow seemed to be in the air. Victory after all, I suppose, he said, feeling his aching head. Well, it seems a very gloomy business. Suddenly he was aware of a man climbing up and coming towards him. Hello there, he called with a shaky voice. Hello there. What news? What voice is it that speaks among the stones? Said the man, halting and peering about him not far from where Bilbo sat. Then Bilbo remembered his ring. Well, I'm blessed, said he. This invisibility has its drawbacks after all. Otherwise, I suppose I might have spent a warm and comfortable night in bed. It's me, Bilbo Baggins, companion of Thorin, he cried, hurriedly taking off the ring. It is well that I have found you, said the man, striding forward. You are needed, and we have looked for you long. You would have been numbered among the dead, who are many, if Gandalf the wizard had not said that your voice was last heard in this place. I have been sent to look here for the last time. Are you much hurt? A nasty knock on the head, I think, said Bilbo, but I have a helm and a hard skull. All the same, I feel sick, and my legs are like straw. I will carry you down to the camp in the valley, said the man, and picked him lightly up. The man was swift and sure-footed. It was not long before Bilbo was set down before a tent in Dale, and there stood Gandalf, with his arm in a sling. Even the wizard had not escaped without a wound, and there were few unharmed in all the host. How? Nom, nom, nom. When Gandalf saw Bilbo, he was delighted. "Baggins!" he exclaimed. "Well, I never! Alive after all! I am glad. I began to wonder if even your luck would see you through. A terrible business, and it nearly was disastrous. But other news can wait. Come," he said more gravely, "you are called for." And leading the hobbit, he took him within the tent. "Hail, Thorin!" he said as he entered. "I have brought him." There indeed lay Thorin Oakenshield, wounded with many wounds, and his rent armor and notched axe were cast upon the floor. He looked up as Bilbo came beside him. "Farewell, good thief," he said. "I go now to the halls of waiting, to sit beside my fathers, until the world is renewed. Since I leave now all gold and silver, and go where it is of little worth, I wish to part in friendship from you, and I would take back my words and deeds at the gate." Bilbo knelt on one knee, filled with sorrow. "Farewell, King Under the Mountain," he said. "This is a bitter adventure, if it must end so, and not a mountain of gold can amend it. Yet I am glad I have shared in your perils. That has been more than any Baggins deserves." "No," said Thorin. "There is more in you of good than you know, child of the kindly West. Some courage and some wisdom, blended in measure. If more of us valued food and cheer and song above hoarded gold, it would be a merrier world. But sad or merry, I must leave it now. Farewell." Then Bilbo turned away, and he went by himself and sat alone wrapped in a blanket, and whether you believe it or not, he wept until his eyes were red and his voice was hoarse. He was a kindly little soul. Indeed, it was long before he had the heart to make a joke again. "A mercy it is," he said at last to himself, "that I woke up when I did. I wish Thorin were living, but I am glad that we parted in kindness. You are a fool, Bilbo Baggins, and you made a great mess of that business with the stone, and there was a battle, in spite of all your efforts to buy peace and quiet, but I suppose you can hardly be blamed for that." All that had happened after he was stunned, Bilbo learnt later, but it gave him more sorrow than joy, and he was now weary of his adventure. He was aching in his bones for the homeward journey. That, however, was a little delayed, so in the meantime I will tell something of events. The eagles had long had suspicion of the goblins' mustering. From their watchfulness, the movements in the mountains could not be altogether hid. So they, too, had gathered in great numbers under the great eagle of the misty mountains, and at length, smelling battle from afar, they had come, speeding down the gale in the nick of time. They it was who dislodged the goblins from the mountain slopes, casting them over precipices. What you doing, Ben? Benedict is slaying a dragon. He's got his dragon toy. Sharky say, "Were you sent for?" Oh boy. I miss that play sometimes. Alright. They it was who water needed. Let me try that one more time. They it was who dislodged the goblins from the mountain slopes, casting them over precipices, or driving them down, shrieking and bewildered among their foes. It was not long before they had freed the lonely mountain, and elves and men on either side of the valley could come at last to the help of the battle below. But even with the eagles they were still outnumbered. In the last hour, Bjorn himself had appeared. No one knew how or from where. He came alone, and in bear's shape, and he seemed to have grown almost to giant size in his wrath. The roar of his voice was like drums and guns. Guns? That's interesting. And he tossed wolves and goblins from his path like straws and feathers. He fell upon their rear, and broke like a clap of thunder through the ring. The dwarves were making a stand still about their lords upon a low, rounded hill. Then Bjorn stooped and lifted Thorin, who had fallen, pierced with spears, and bore him out of the fray. Swiftly he returned, and his wrath was redoubled, so that nothing could withstand him, and no weapon seemed to bite upon him. He scattered the bodyguard, and pulled down Bolg himself and crushed him. Then dismay fell on the goblins, and they fled in all directions. But weariness left their enemies with the coming of new hope, and they pursued them closely, and prevented most of them from escaping where they could. They drove many of them into the running river, and such as fled south or west they hunted into the marshes about the forest river, and there the greater part of the last fugitives perished, while those that came hardly to the wood elves' realm were there slain, or drawn in to die deep in the trackless dark of Mirkwood. Songs have said that 3 parts of the goblin warriors of the north perished on that day, and the mountains had peace for many a year. Victory had been assured before the fall of night, but the pursuit was still on foot when Bilbo returned to the camp, and not many were in the valley save the more grievously wounded. "Where are the eagles?" he asked Gandalf that evening, as he lay wrapped in many warm blankets. "Some are in the hunt," said the wizard, "but most have gone back to their eyries. They would not stay here, and departed with the first light of morning. Dane has crowned their chief with gold, and sworn friendship with them forever." "I am sorry. I mean, I should have liked to see them again," said Bilbo sleepily. "Perhaps I shall see them on the way home. I suppose I shall be going home soon?" "As soon as you like," said the wizard. Actually, it was some days before Bilbo really set out. They buried Thorin deep beneath the mountain, and Bard laid the Arkenstone upon his breast. "There let it lie till the mountain falls," he said. "May it bring good fortune to all his folk that dwell hereafter." Upon his tomb the Elven King then laid Orcrist, the elvish sword that had been taken from Thorin in captivity. It is said in songs that it gleamed ever in the dark if foes approached, and the fortress of the dwarves could not be taken by surprise. There now Dane, son of Nain, took up his abode, and he became king under the mountain, and in time many other dwarves gathered to his throne in the ancient halls. Of the 12 companions of Thorin, 10 remained. Fili and Kili had fallen, defending him with shield and body, for he was their mother's eldest brother. The others remained with Dane, for Dane dealt his treasure well. There was, of course, no longer any question of dividing the hoard in such shares as had been planned, to Balin and Dwalin, and Dori and Nori and Ori, and Oin and Gloin, and Bifur and Boffer and Bomber, or to Bilbo. Yet a 14th share of all the silver and gold, wrought and unwrought, was given up to Bard, for Dane said, we will honor the agreement of the dead, and he has now the Arkenstone in his keeping." Even a 14th share was wealth exceedingly great, greater than that of many mortal kings. From that treasure Bard sent much gold to the master of Lake Town, and he rewarded his followers and friends freely. To the Elven King he gave the emeralds of Girion, such jewels as he most loved, which Dane had restored to him. If you remember earlier, it had mentioned that the Elven King loves jewels. To Bilbo he said, "This treasure is as much yours as it is mine, though old agreements cannot stand, since so many have a claim in its winning and defense. Yet, even though you were willing to lay aside all your claim, I should wish that the words of Thorin, of which he repented, should not prove true, that we should give you little. I would reward you most richly of all." "Very kind of you," said Bilbo, "but really it is a relief to me. How on earth should I have got all that treasure home without war and murder all along the way, I don't know. And I don't know what I should have done with it when I got home. I am sure it is better in your hands." In the end, he would only take 2 small chests, one filled with silver and the other with gold, such as one strong pony could carry. "That will be quite as much as I can manage," said he. At last, the time came for him to say goodbye to his friends. "Farewell, Balin," he said, "and farewell, Dwalin, and farewell, Dori, Nori, Ori, Oin, Gloin, Beaver, Boffer, and Bomber. May your beards never grow thin." And turning towards the mountain, he added, "Farewell, Thorin Oakenshield, and Fili and Kili. May your memory never fade." Then the dwarfs bowed low before their gate, but words stuck in their throats. "Goodbye and good luck, wherever you fare," said Balin at last. "If ever you visit us again, when our halls are made fair once more, then the feast shall indeed be splendid." "If ever you are passing my way," said Bilbo, "don't wait to knock. Tea is at 4, but any of you are welcome at any time." Then he turned away. The elf host was on the march, and if it was sadly lessened, yet many were glad, for now the northern world would be merrier for many a long day. The dragon was dead, and the goblins overthrown, and their hearts looked forward after winter to a spring of joy. Gandalf and Bilbo rode behind the Elven King, and beside them strode Beorn, once again in man's shape, and he laughed and sang in a loud voice upon the road. So they went on until they drew near to the borders of Mirkwood, to the north of the place where the forest river ran out. Then they halted, for the wizard and Bilbo would not enter the wood, even though the king bade them stay a while in his halls. They intended to go along the edge of the forest, and round its northern end in the waste that lay between it and the beginning of the Grey Mountains. It was a long and cheerless road, but now that the goblins were crushed, it seemed safer to them than the dreadful pathways under the trees. Moreover, Beorn was going that way too. "Farewell, O Elven King," said Gandalf. "Merry be the greenwood, while the world is yet young, and merry be all your folk." "Farewell, O Gandalf," said the king. "May you ever appear where you are most needed and least expected. The oftener you appear in my halls, the better I shall be pleased." "I beg of you," said Bilbo, stammering and standing on one foot, "to accept this gift." And he brought out a necklace of silver and pearls that Dane had given him at their parting. "In what way have I earned such a gift, O Hobbit?" said the king. "Well, I thought, don't you know," said Bilbo, rather confused, "that, some little return should be made for your, hospitality. I mean, even a burglar has his feelings. I have drunk much of your wine and eaten much of your bread." "I will take your gift, O Bilbo the Magnificent," said the king gravely. and I name you elf friend and blessed. May your shadow never grow less, or stealing would be too easy. Farewell!" Then the elves turned towards the forest, and Bilbo started on his long road home. He had many hardships and adventures before he got back. The wild was still the wild, and there were many other things in it those days beside goblins. But he was well guided and well guarded. The wizard was with him, and Beorn for much of the way, and he was never in great danger again. Anyway, by midwinter, Gandalf and Bilbo had come all the way back, along both edges of the forest, to the doors of Beorn's house, and there for a while they both stayed. Yuletide was warm and merry there, and men came from far and wide to feast at Beorn's bidding. That's interesting. The goblins of the Misty Mountains were now few and terrified, and hidden in the deepest holes they could find, and the wargs had vanished from the woods, so that men went abroad without fear. Benedict hears some people talking outside, I think. Beorn, indeed, became a great chief afterwards in those regions, and ruled a wide land between the mountains and the wood. And it is said that for many generations the men of his line had the power of taking bear's shape, and some were grim men and bad, but most were in heart like Beorn, if less in size and strength. In their day, the last goblins were hunted from the Misty Mountains, and a new peace came over the edge of the wild. It was spring, and a fair one with mild weathers and a bright sun, before Bilbo and Gandalf took their leave at last of Beorn, and though he longed for home, Bilbo left with regret, for the flowers of the gardens of Beorn were in springtime no less marvelous than in high summer. At last they came up the long road, and reached the very pass where the goblins had captured them before. But they came to that high point at morning, and looking backward they saw a white sun shining over the outstretched lands. There behind lay Mirkwood, blue in the distance, and darkly green at the nearer edge, even in the spring. There far away was the lonely mountain, on the edge of eyesight. On its highest peak, snow, yet unmelted, was gleaming pale. "So comes snow after fire, and even dragons have their ending," said Bilbo, and he turned his back on his adventure. The Tookish part was getting very tired, and the Baggins was daily getting stronger. "I wish now only to be in my own armchair," he said. And that's the end of chapter 18. We're on to the final chapter, chapter 19, the last stage. Let's see, I think I need to angle it a bit to get the light better. No? Let's see if I can... I feel like that was a very sad chapter. Farmo says Puppy is all riled up about goblins. Well, it's not coming through very clearly, but we have here a picture of a hobbit hole, I believe. Let's see if I can... I'll take it away for a moment and bring it back and see if that'll do it. In the meantime, let's take a look at the chat. Live streaming, cake eating, concussion, yeah. That's the spirit bin. Farmos, talking about the dragon. He brought it in here. That doesn't happen often. Everybody hates goblins. Sharky noticed, too, how he mentioned guns and drums, as if Tolkien was remembering real war outside the narrative, which is also said to be written by Bilbo. Yeah, definitely the guns and drums made me think if Tolkien was speaking to personal experience. because that is sort of a strange thing to come up in this book. I don't know that there's really any other mention of guns in Middle-earth. Because this isn't one of those settings where, sometimes you get in a fantasy setting, you get like a rare, black powder firearm or something like that. But I don't personally remember any of that in any of the books. Farmos, the internet says Airy, even though it's spelled Irie. Airy in North America. Like Airy. That, I feel like, says Farmos, is like Bilbo's ultimate compliment. Never wait to knock, come at any time. Like he's saying, you're my closest, dearest friends. Sharky agrees. Farmos says, that elf friend thing is a big deal that comes up in Lord of the Rings. Yes. And Puppy is all riled up about goblins. Erica and Farmos are feeling bittersweet about getting to the last chapter. Well, and that chapter that we just read is so sad. There we go, now it's focusing. Just had to give it a break. The last stage, everyone. That's what we're on. We're on the last stage of this book. Let's see if I can get a little closer. No, lost the focus doing that. So yes, there we have a fire in a hearth, a round hearth, and there's a table with papers on it and a quill in ink, and a stool with a cushion, pictures on a wall, and sconces with lights in them, and you can kind of see a hallway to the side, a round hall, and what looks like the remainder of a meal in front of the hearth. A very comfortable picture. So Thorin did not survive the battle, nor did Fili and Kili, which is quite sad. And I feel like perhaps a little more sad having taken so long in going through this book in detail like this. I feel like it's more sad to me that saying goodbye to them. And I had forgotten about Thorin's farewell speech, even though I've read this book so many times. I don't know how I forget any details, but it still happens. Oh, a wee hearth, yeah. But Bilbo is on his way home, and he's reaching there now. So chapter 19, the last stage. Let's finish the book, everyone. Actually, before we do, I'm going to have another bite of cake. It's the slowest I've ever ate cake before. Tasty, tasty cheesecake. Parma says, is it though? You're a pretty slow eater as it is. Yes, but I mean, now I'm extra slow because I'm reading full chapters of a book between bites. I'm going to have lots left over when we're done here. All right. Let's do it. Is everybody ready? Ready to finish this adventure that you've joined me on? Chapter 19. The last stage. It was on May the 1st that the two came back at last to the brink of the valley of Rivendell, where stood the last, or the first, homely house. I suppose it's the first because it's the first they're encountering on their way back. Again, it was evening. Their ponies were tired, especially the one that carried the baggage, and they all felt in need of rest. As they rode down the steep path, Bilbo heard the elves still singing in the trees, as if they had not stopped since he left, and as soon as the riders came down into the lower glades of the wood, they burst into song of much the same kind as before. This is something like it, and I believe there are many songs in this chapter, so nice, hopefully. Oh, Sharkies say, let's see. Eric Kerr says, I was going to say that is an impressive record for my eating slowly. Farmo says there are still 2 more almond cram cakes. Sharky says, the missus brought out something between cram and lembas. More lembas bread. Nice, hopefully. That doesn't sound the absolute most appealing. I think lembas bread... Is it lembas? I thought it was lembas bread. Anyways. I think lembas bread was supposed to be, I think, better than cram. If I remember correctly, it's described as tasting of honey. But I suppose they end up eating so much of it that even that gets tiring. Lefse? Farmos, oh good, I expected given her baking, but cram, not so much. Yeah. Alright. This is something like it. The dragon is withered, his bones are now crumbled, his armor is shivered, his splendor is humbled. The sword shall be rusted, and throne and crown perish, with strength that men trusted, and wealth that they cherish. Here grass is still growing, and leaves are yet swinging, the white water flowing, and elves are yet singing. Come, tra-la-la-lally, come back to the valley. The stars are far brighter than gems without measure, the moon is far whiter than silver and treasure, the fire is more shining on hearth in the gloaming than gold won by mining, so why go a-roaming? O tra-la-la-lally, come back to the valley. Oh, where are you going, so late in returning? The river is flowing, the stars are all burning. Oh, whither so laden, so sad and so dreary? Here elf and elf maiden now welcome the weary. With tra-la-la-lally, come back to the valley. Tra-la-la-lally, fa-la-la-lally, fa-la. There's my elf song. Oh boy. Sharky says, Norwegian flatbread, had it from a box with cinnamon sugar spread. Ooh. Cinnamon sugar spread. Very, very nice. Marmos also says, ooh, nice. Then the elves of the valley came out and greeted them, and led them across the water to the house of Elrond. There a warm welcome was made them, and there were many eager ears that evening to hear the tale of their adventures. Gandalf it was who spoke, for Bilbo had fallen quiet and drowsy. Most of the tale he knew, for he had been in it, and he himself told much of it to the wizard on their homeward way, or in the house of Beorn. But every now and again he would open one eye and listen, when a part of the story which he did not yet know came in. It was in this way that he learnt where Gandalf had been to, for he overheard the words of the wizard to Elrond. It appeared that Gandalf had been to a great council of the White Wizards, masters of lore and good magic, and that they had at last driven the necromancer from his dark hold in the south of Mirkwood. Well, there you go. That's what Gandalf's been up to. Ere long now, Gandalf was saying, the forest will grow somewhat more wholesome. The north will be freed from that horror for many long years, I hope. Yet I wish he were banished from the world. So the necromancer is still around. It would be well indeed, said Elrond, but I fear that will not come about in this age of the world, or for many after. When the tale of their journeyings was told, there were other tales, and yet more tales, tales of long ago, and tales of new things, and tales of no time at all, till Bilbo's head fell forward on his chest, and he snored comfortably in a corner. He woke to find himself in a white bed, and the moon shining through an open window. Below it, many elves were singing loud and clear on the banks of the stream. Of course they were. Ericer just ate a piece of toast with the pumpkin butter on it. Oh, nice, says Farmouse. He's in Lord of the Rings 60 years or so before he's gone. Who are you talking about? Bilbo? Oh, the Witch King. Yes. Yes. All right. Below it, many elves were singing loud and clear on the banks of the stream. Let's see. What tune is this going to go to? Sing all ye joyful, now sing all together. The wind's in the treetop, the wind's in the heather. The stars are in blossom, the moon is in flower, and bright are the windows of night in her tower. Dance all ye joyful, now dance all together. Soft is the grass, yet let foot be like feather. The river is silver, the shadows are fleeting. Merry is Maytime, and merry our meeting. Sing we now softly, in dreams let us weave him. Wind him in slumber, and there let us leave him. The wanderer sleepeth, now soft be his pillow. Lullaby, lullaby, alder and willow. Sigh no more, pine, till the wind of the morn. Fall moon, dark be the land. Hush, hush, oak, ash, and thorn. Hushed be all water, till dawn is at hand. Well, merry people, said Bilbo, looking out. What time by the moon is this? Your lullaby would waken a drunken goblin. Yet I thank you. Rude, Bilbo. And your snores would waken a stone dragon. Yet we thank you, they answered with laughter. It is drawing towards dawn, and you have slept now since the night's beginning. Tomorrow perhaps you will be cured of weariness. A little sleep does a great cure in the house of Elrond, said he, but I will take all the cure I can get. A second good night, fair friends. And with that he went back to bed and slept in till late morning. Weariness fell from him soon in that house, and he had many a merry jest and dance, early and late, with the elves of the valley. Yet even that place could not long delay him now, and he thought always of his own home. After a week, therefore, he said farewell to Elrond, and giving him such small gifts as he would accept, he rode away with Gandalf. Even as they left the valley, the sky darkened in the west before them, and wind and rain came up to meet them. Merry is Maytime, said Bilbo as the rain beat into his face. But our back is to legends, and we are coming home. I suppose this is the first taste of it. There is a long road yet, said Gandalf. But it is the last road, said Bilbo. Why, it's Christmas Day, said the elves, says Sharky. Oh, what? Lilifay raid? Hey! Welcome, everybody. You're joining us just for the very end of The Hobbit. We're on page 359 out of 365, so we're just on the last couple pages. Brought some friends? Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Happy Hobbit Day, everyone. September 22nd is Bilbo's birthday, and is Hobbit Day. And if I'm not mistaken, now I said September 22nd, right? I didn't say that wrong. If I'm not mistaken, September 21st is also the publishing date of The Hobbit. But either way, yes, happy Hobbit Day to you. So we're reading The Hobbit, and I am eating some cake. I'll show you my cakes. I'm eating very slowly. I've got some cheesecake and some almond cakes. At the beginning of the book, Bilbo eats seed cakes, and he's always dreaming about cakes. So I thought it was an appropriate celebration for Hobbit Day. And it just lined up that we were on the very last couple of chapters here of The Hobbit, for Hobbit Day here. And so we're going to finish this book tonight. We're almost done. Only 6 pages to go. And then on Friday at 7 o'clock, we're going to pick a new book to start on. And so we've got a few options, and we're going to talk about that then, and pick something new, and we'll start on a new adventure. But welcome, everyone. I hope you don't mind listening to me read if you're here to join us. Oh no, spoilers? I'm sorry. It is the end of the journey, and there's not much action to be had here. What is that? Nixara. But so there won't be really any of the big plot points of the book spoiled if you haven't read it before or seen the films. Though really the films, I mean, they follow the plot, but they deviate quite a lot. But there won't be much spoiled except for the very end of returning home, as it were. Although to be fair, the book is called The Hobbit or There and Back Again, so you do really know from the very first page that there's going to be some kind of back again, which is what's happening here. We're at the second part of the title, Back Again. Love the tie. Oh, thank you very much. Yes, this is my Hobbit outfit. This is my Hobbitish clothes, and now that we're done this book, I might have to actually pick out a new outfit depending on what we end up reading next. Oh boy, I'm missing lots here. We were just talking about the Witch King before that. He's just getting home. Ooh, yummy cakes. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they are very tasty. I've got a cheesecake with a bit of a strawberry swirl and those almond cakes. That's like an hour of cake eating progress. Nixara, so sorry I missed that. Was trying to not eat fresh out the oven cookies so you can still taste things tomorrow, but thank you for alleviating your spoiler feels. Well, hey, now you've got cookies for Hobbit Day as well, so that's, I think, quite fitting. That is a struggle indeed. Fresh cookies, yes. Cookies are definitely the best when they're fresh, in my personal opinion. All right, let's continue. Let's get to the end of this book. Oh, it's already almost 8:30. Geez, I guess we have had quite a lot to read tonight. So let's get through it. We've only got 6 pages to go. But it is the last road, said Bilbo. They came to the river that marked the very edge of the borderland of the wild, and to the ford beneath the steep bank, which you may remember. The water was swollen, both with the melting of the snows at the approach of summer, and with the day-long rain. But they crossed with some difficulty, and pressed forward, as evening fell, on the last stage of their journey. This was much as it had been before, except that the company was smaller and more silent. Also, this time there were no trolls. At each point on the road, Bilbo recalled the happenings and the words of a year ago. It seemed to him more like 10. So that, of course, he quickly noted the place where the pony had fallen in the river, and they had turned aside for their nasty adventure with Tom and Bert and Bill. Not far from the road, they found the gold of the trolls, which they had buried, still hidden and untouched. I have enough to last me my time, said Bilbo when they had dug it up. You had better take this, Gandalf. I dare say you can find a use for it. Indeed I can, said the wizard. But share and share alike. You may find you have more needs than you expect. So they put the gold in bags and slung them on the ponies, who were not at all pleased about it. After that, their going was slower, for most of the time they walked. But the land was green, and there was much grass through which the hobbit strolled along contentedly. He mopped his face with a red silk handkerchief. No, not a single one of his own had survived. He had borrowed this one from Elrond. For now June had brought summer, and the weather was bright and hot again. As all things come to an end, even this story, a day came at last when they were in sight of the country where Bilbo had been born and bred, where the shapes of the land and of the trees were as well known to him as his hands and toes. Coming to a rise, he could see his own hill in the distance, and he stopped suddenly and said, Roads go ever, ever on, over rock and under tree, by caves where never sun has shone, by streams that never find the sea, over snow by winter sown, and through the merry flowers of June, over grass and over stone, and under mountains in the moon. Roads go ever on, under cloud and under star, yet feet that wandering have gone turn at last to home afar. Eyes that fire and sword have seen, and horror in the halls of stone, look at last on meadows green, and trees and hills they long have known. Gandalf looked at him. "My dear Bilbo," he said, "something is the matter with you. You are not the hobbit that you were." And so they crossed the bridge, and passed the mill by the river, and came right back to Bilbo's own door. "Bless me! What's going on?" he cried. There was a great commotion, and people of all sorts, respectable and unrespectable, were thick round the door, and many were going in and out, not even wiping their feet on the mat, as Bilbo noticed with annoyance. If he was surprised, they were more surprised still. He had arrived back in the middle of an auction. There was a large notice in black and red hung on the gate, stating that on June the 22nd, Messrs. What is that? Monsignors? I don't know. It says Messrs. Messrs. Do you just say Messrs. or is that like Monsignors? I wonder. Well, either way. Messrs. Grubb, and Burrows would sell by auction the effects of the late Bilbo Baggins, Esquire, of Bag End, Underhill, Hobbiton. Sale to commence at 10 o'clock sharp. It was now nearly lunchtime, and most of the things had already been sold, for various prices, from next to nothing to old songs, as is not unusual at auctions. Clearly, I don't know if you guys know that, but frequently you can go to an auction and buy things for an old song. You knew that, right? Let's see. Bilbo's cousins, the Sackville Bagginses, were in fact busy measuring his rooms to see if their own furniture would fit. In short, Bilbo was presumed dead, and not everybody that said so was sorry to find the presumption wrong. The return of Mr. Bilbo Baggins created quite a disturbance, both under the hill and over the hill, and across the water. It was a great deal more than a 9 days' wonder. The legal bother, indeed, lasted for years. It was quite a long time before Mr. Baggins was in fact admitted to be alive again. I love that. The people who had got specially good bargains at the sale took a deal of convincing, and in the end, to save time, Bilbo had to buy back quite a lot of his own furniture. Many of his silver spoons mysteriously disappeared and were never accounted for. Personally, he suspected the Sackville Bagginses. On their side, they never admitted that the returned Baggins was genuine, and they were not on friendly terms with Bilbo ever after. They really had wanted to live in his nice hobbit hole so very much. Indeed, Bilbo found he had lost more than spoons. He had lost his reputation. It is true that forever after he remained an elf friend, and had the honor of dwarves, wizards, and all such folk as ever passed that way, but he was no longer quite respectable. He was, in fact, held by all the hobbits of the neighborhood to be queer, except by his nephews and nieces on the Took side, but even they were not encouraged in their friendship by their elders. I am sorry to say he did not mind. He was quite content, and the sound of the kettle on his hearth was ever after more musical than it had been even in the quiet days before the unexpected party. His sword he hung over the mantelpiece. His coat of mail was arranged on a stand in the hall, until he lent it to a museum. His gold and silver was largely spent in presents, both useful and extravagant, which to a certain extent accounts for the affection of his nephews and his nieces. His magic ring he kept a great secret, for he chiefly used it when unpleasant callers came. He took to writing poetry and visiting the elves. And though many shook their heads and touched their foreheads and said, "Poor old Baggins," and though few believed any of his tales, he remained very happy to the end of his days, and those were extraordinarily long. One autumn evening, some years afterwards, Bilbo was sitting in his study room, writing his memoirs. He thought of calling them There and Back Again, a Hobbit's Holiday, when there was a ring at the door. It was Gandalf, and a dwarf, and the dwarf was actually Balin. Come in," said Bilbo, and soon they were settled in chairs by the fire. If Balin noticed that Mr. Baggins' waistcoat was more extensive, and had real gold buttons, Bilbo also noticed that Balin's beard was several inches longer, and his jeweled belt was of great magnificence. They fell to talking of their times together, of course, and Bilbo asked how things were going in the lands of the mountain. It seemed they were going very well. Bard had rebuilt the town of Dale, and men had gathered to him from the lake and from south and west, and all the valley had become tilled again and rich, and the desolation was now filled with birds and blossoms in spring, and fruit and feasting in the autumn. And Lake Town was refounded, and was more prosperous than ever, and much wealth went up and down the running river, and there was friendship in those parts between elves and dwarves and men. The old master had come to a bad end. Bard had given him much gold for the help of the lake people, but being of the kind that easily catches such disease, he fell under the dragon sickness, and took most of the gold, and fled with it, and died of starvation in the waste, deserted by his companions. Well, that's a little grim, right, Bard? "The new master is of wiser kind," said Balin, "and very popular, for of course he gets most of the credit for the present prosperity. They are making songs which say that in his day the rivers run with gold." Then the prophecies of the old songs have turned out to be true, after a fashion," said Bilbo. "Of course," said Gandalf, "and why should not they prove true? Surely you don't disbelieve the prophecies, because you had a hand in bringing them about yourself? You don't really suppose, do you, that all your adventures and escapes were managed by mere luck, just for your sole benefit? You are a very fine person, Mr. Baggins, and I am very fond of you, but you are only quite a little fellow in a wide world, after all." "Thank goodness," said Bilbo, laughing, and handed him the tobacco jar. And that's the end. We did it. We made it through the entire book. All 365 pages of The Hobbit. And here's a map at the back, which I don't think is exactly the same as the map at the beginning. No, it's not. It's much more detailed. Actually, this mostly shows Mirkwood. Let me see. I'll turn it this way. I think, no, let's keep it the way it's up. See if we can get this to focus. I'm sure I'll have some chat to catch up on. But I don't know if you can see, let's see, on this side over here, here's Mirkwood. And there's some various points in there, and you've got a little dragon up in the corner for the desolation of Smaug. Yeah, it's not focusing super well, Welderland, but I think that's about as good as we're going to get. All right, what's everybody saying? We were talking about cookies. Farmo says, still the best troll names. Lily Faye loves my mug. This was, I think, fitting for tonight's finishing of the book. Macers, Grub and whatever it was, auctioning off Bilbo's things. Those Sackville Bagginses. Erica took a deal of convincing, eh? Eh? Yeah, that's right. Lily Fay noticing the kettle on the hearth. Farmos, I feel you, Bilbo. Sometimes I would like to disappear when people try to come to my door. Yeah. Sharky says, oh, that's our bard, all right. Him and his grim sayings. Robot Kyo survived it. Good game. Oh, nice. Sharky says, the elves, who are also a lot more giddy than the solemn elves of the films, says the missus. Yeah. Yeah, the last Homely House elves are very merry and always singing songs, and they often seem to be, making jokes and smiling and whatnot. They're just always having a good time. Out of the last Homely House, the elves by Elrond, I don't know that the elves of the wood are quite so merry. Those ones seem to be a little more grim. But it does kind of feel like in the films, almost all the elves more closely resemble the elves of the wood. Erica says the elves are a lot more tra-la-la-lally in The Hobbit. Yeah, here down in the valley. That's right. Fala. I mean, I don't know. It's been quite a while since I've read The Lord of the Rings, so I don't know whether they get a little more grim in at the last Homely House in those books. So maybe that's why, because, Robot Kios says Keebler-esque. I wouldn't go that far. The elves are not mentioned making cookies, necessarily. We're finished. We finished The Hobbit. Bittersweet, like we were saying. Show the cover one more time. We made it through. Sharkies need to change the light bulbs. What? We need to change the light bulbs, said Elrond grimly. One of you must do this. Well, I feel like I'm going to have to put this book prominent in the back over here. Whoops. On this side. Along with the artwork wall. I feel like it's going to have to go up maybe like right in this space. Just get up and squeeze past my table here. What do you guys think? Like right there? I don't know. Yeah, you can kind of see it in the back. Oh boy. Place of honor. It's weird. It's weird that we're done the book. We started it on July 28th was the first stream. And now it's September 22nd. So it was very close to 2 months of doing somewhere between 2 to 3 chapters a week, roughly. Is, I think, more or less what we averaged. For anyone that's stuck around that is new to the stream, oh boy, there's a lot of people in the chat right now. What do we got here? Cardboard Confrontation, Droop Dog, Eatage, Lily Faye, Nixara, Fabio, Sharas Bloopers. Those are names I don't recognize. Well, welcome to all of you. So I do this every Monday and Friday. That's what we have been doing. 7 o'clock Pacific Daylight Time. Robot Kyo says it hasn't felt like that long. It hasn't felt like 2 months to you? Yeah, it's one of those... Erica says it needs a book stand. Yeah, its own little shelf back there. Yeah, it's one of those things where I feel like it feels like it hasn't been that long, and it feels like maybe it's almost been longer, but feels shorter to you. But yeah, so on Friday, we've got a few different options for what our next book's going to be. Some of the ones that come to mind. I feel like, as much as I don't think it's likely, we should probably talk about the actual Lord of the Rings books as an option, but it's just that's such a huge time investment. Those are so much longer than The Hobbit. Um, Otherwise, it's mostly other books that are personal favorites. There's the Magician, the first two books of Magician by Raymond E. Feist, which is a very swords and sorcery adventure type of books that are actually based on a Dungeons and Dragons game. But the first two books don't really feel like it. If you get to, I think it's the third or the fourth book, Silverthorn, that one really feels like a D&D game. But the first two books, if I didn't know about it myself, I wouldn't have guessed. We were talking about A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula Le Guin, which is another personal favorite. A compelling story about a young boy from an island that is famous for producing goat farmers and wizards. And it turns out that he is talented at magic and is sent off to learn about it. Erica's posting a Thingiverse file for a display for the book. Pharma says the Magician's books have unexpected stories. I'm not sure what you mean. What else were we talking about? Another personal favorite is The Belgariad by David Eddings, and that I think is a series that not many people that I know personally have read. So I think that would be a fun one to go to as something that might be new to people. And that series is about a young boy named Garion who grows up on a farm. I mean, we'll talk about this all on Friday at 7 o'clock, but grows up on a farm, and then it turns out that perhaps he has an unexpected and quite important destiny ahead of him. Oh, I see. Pharma says they seem very typical until suddenly they don't. Yes, I would agree that's definitely true about Magician. It's got a few twists in it that aren't necessarily like shocking, but they take the story in quite unexpected directions. And that's something that I like about them, is that they don't, I think, follow a typical storyline for fantasy. Robot Kyo does like Ursula Le Guin and have heard Earthsea is one of the popular ones. Oh, you haven't read it. It's very good. It definitely has its frightening moments. It's moments of scary things happening, and I have found that Ursula Le Guin is very talented at writing scenes of despair, where things just seem without hope, and you don't know how they could get better, and then maybe they do. But it's also a world where it has its moments of joy, but I feel like sometimes, I don't know, parts of it feel like a world in decline, but not all. Like there are things that improve, and some things that there's sort of, I feel like, a melancholy feel to that world to me. But I might, I don't know whether I am the authority on that, but that's how I feel. It also has, I feel like all of these books have very interesting and somewhat different takes on magic, which is something that I appreciate. Let's see, the Magician books, their magics. Well, again, this is stuff that we can talk about on Friday. I think it's already quite late here. We're getting towards 9 o'clock, which normally we're finished a good half an hour ago by this point. Farmo says the Earthsea books are very cinematically written. They're books that sound so great when you read them out loud. Well, I have never actually read them out loud before, so we would definitely experience that if that's the case. Sharky's Mrs. has read Earthsea, but Sharky has yet to. Oh, well. If that ends up being the one, you are in for a treat. It's a very good book. I don't think that I would go on the stream to read the sequels. There's at least 3 sequels. The first book is A Wizard of Earthsea, then there's The Tombs of Atuin, and then I think The Farthest Shore, and I forget what the 4th book is named because it was one that came out more recently, I believe, and I hadn't read it until much later than having read the original trilogy. And The sequel books are still quite good, but I have a feeling like I enjoy each subsequent book less than the one before. And the first book is complete in itself, which is something that is a benefit for this. For this format, I think we could just read the first book and then move on to something else if we choose to go that way. Oh, Tehanu, says Eriker. Yes, that's right. Thank you. Tehanu is the name of the fourth book. Farmos really liked the second Earthsea book, but it is quite grim, quite bard-like. Robot Kyo wonders about one of Pratchett's. I mean, I do really quite like Terry Pratchett's books. I would love to read maybe Guards. I think Farmos has suggested The Color of Magic, which would be great because it's, like that's the first Discworld book, right? It's The Color of Magic. But I do feel also like in that book, he hadn't quite found his tone yet. Like, the world isn't quite ironed out in the details, and some things that come up in that book are different later on. For instance, I think there's an elf, and it's more like a Keebler elf. Then later on, the elves are kind of scary menaces in the Terry Pratchett books in Discworld. And the trolls are quite different in the first book of Discworld than they are in later books. And maybe that gets explained a little bit, but I think it's mostly just a retcon later on, because the way they're described in the first book, they're quite significantly different. Oh, let's see. Lily Faye, someone just recommended the Belgariad series. It's their favorite book series, says Lily Faye. Yes, I very much enjoy that series. And it's nice because, like, you've got the Belgariad, which I think is 5 books, but they're all, I would say they're all probably about the same length as The Hobbit, so it's definitely a longer read in total, but probably not altogether as long as Lord of the Rings, I would guess. And then once you're done with the Belgariad, there's a second series called The Malorian, which picks up right at the end of the Belgariad and continues. Like, the Belgariad is a complete story, but the Malorian continues it, and with the same, like, many of the same characters carrying over, because it picks up almost like in the time of the story, it picks up almost right where the Belgariad left off. Farmo says the Discworld books also sound great when read aloud. She's heard them in audiobooks before. Eriker has read The Color of Magic and wasn't wild about it. Would like to try reading Pratchett in his stride. I mean, if I weren't gonna start with The Color of Magic, I might want to go with Guards, just because I really like the Guards series. Sam Vimes is a great character, and it's sort of a complete series by itself. And in that series, you can see the city of Ankh-Morpork, kind of evolving over time, and you get a good feel for the Discworld. But if it weren't that series, I don't know, maybe one of the Witches books or something. That's, I'm not certain. I would have to figure out how to deal with all the footnotes in those books. Farmo says the Belgariad is such a great series. Its only thing is that it doesn't really end until the last one, so you're in for reading all of them potentially. Yeah, there's definitely, each book is leading into the next one in that series. The entirety of the, I think, 5 books is one story. Farmo says Guards is usually the book she'd recommend to read first in terms of introduction to Pratchett. It's his first in the sort of Guards or Watchmen series. Robot Kyo says Guards was the first one Farmo suggested to him, and he loved it enough to start reading all his books in order. Farmo says it's also not quite got everything solidified, but it's still such a good book. Yes, it is not, it's definitely more finding its footing than The Color of Magic was. Guards, that is. But again, there's still things, he hasn't 100% settled into his tone, but it's definitely much more so. I'd say it's the beginning, really, of him finding what he wanted the Discworld to be like. Pharma says the Witches series also starts quite a bit earlier in his books. Oh, yeah, technically the third one is the first Witches book. Yes, that's true. So I could very easily keep going here, talking about all these books, but then I feel like I'll be spoiling what we're going to do on Friday. So this is something for everyone to think about, just different. And if anyone has a suggestion that they'd really like me to read, I would love to hear those as well. Oh, thank you, Lily, complimenting my voice. I appreciate it. Although it feels a little rough now. We've been here since 7 o'clock, so 2 hours of talking here. Remind me to take a drink of water. But yes, those are all, I think, the primary books that I was thinking of for our next one. Lots of heart emojis of various types from Lily. Thank you. Have I ever read Rick Riordan? They are silly fun, which translates well for this kind of thing. Edith says, cheers. Thank you. Rick Riordan, was that Percy Jackson? Because I've read one of those, I think. It was a pleasure to hang. Well, you're welcome to return. Everyone here, please, feel free to come on back. You'll be in on the ground floor for starting a brand new book on, we'll talk about the books on Friday, and then we'll probably actually start the next book next Monday. So that will be, let me take a look at my calendar here. Friday is the 24th, and then Monday will be September 27th. So Monday will be when we actually start reading. And so if you want to be here from the beginning, generally what we do is we read a chapter and then we talk about it. And that I find is great for finding little details. Like from having just gone through The Hobbit, which is a book I've read so many times before, there are lots of little details, which, I'm always, normally when I read that book, I go through it so quickly. So I feel like I missed out on some of the details. And I feel like the characters kind of became a little more personal having read it this way. Oh boy. Erica says, thanks for coming, Lily Faye Raid. Lily recommends Murderbot Diaries. Erica says, yes, Percy Jackson. Also Magnus Chase and the Kane siblings. Robakio, knock knock, doors always open. Yes, but 7 o'clock is book time. Lily has so many recommendations. Erica's yelling Murderbot, so I don't know if Erica is aware of this series, but I would guess, judging based on the profession, maybe so. But yeah, bring your suggestions. I see Erica recommended them to Lily. I would prefer to read something without too much swearing in it, just because we do have some younger folk joining us occasionally. And I think what we'll do is on Friday, I will put up a poll and we'll do a vote on what to read next. As I have mentioned a couple times before. And and then we'll decide that way. Hopefully we can actually come to a consensus on what we're going to read next. Oh, Erica's got a resource for checking which books have swears. That will be very useful. Thank you very much for that. How do you know so much about books, Erica? I'm just going to have to read forever now. Well, that's another thing. Our schedule has been Mondays and Fridays at 7 o'clock p.m., but some people's schedules have been changing more recently, and so I think on Friday that's another thing we'll talk about is that schedule and whether we should adjust it, and if so, to what times. So if you want to have some input on when we're doing this book stream, please come on back on Friday, and then you can vote on which books next, and we can talk about what the schedule should look like, whether we should stick to Mondays and Fridays at 7, or if we can adjust it in a way that works for more people. Tuesdays and Thursday evenings don't work super well for me personally because I practice martial arts on those days. And at 7 o'clock as well. So, I mean, I could make those work if we did earlier in the day. Wednesdays work for me. Last time we checked on this, Wednesdays didn't work for most people, which is why we cut them out of the schedule initially. Um, and then we only came back to it today for, Bilbo's birthday, which, once again, happy birthday, Bilbo Baggins, and happy Hobbit Day, everyone. We did it. We finished The Hobbit on Hobbit Day. I think that's such a sublime coincidence that worked out. It feels like fate. Yay, library friends. Achievement granted. Yeah. Little pop up in the corner of my heads up display. Happy Hobbit Day. Sharky's putting kids to bed. Looking forward to Friday. Good night, everyone. Good night, Sharky. Happy Hobbit Day. Happy Hobbit Day to your house. I hope you enjoyed your cakes. Erica says Divine Providence. Well, that might come up if we read some certain ones of these books. Divine Providence might be something that comes up every now and then. Yeah. So, I think we should wrap it up there. It's now 9 o'clock. Oh, boy. So, happy Hobbit Day, everyone. Thank you for joining me for this extra long stream. And thank you for joining me on the adventure of reading The Hobbit. I'm going to be sentimental about that, I think. We made it through. We made it there and back again. Happy birthday, Bilbo Baggins. Happy Hobbit Day to all the rest of you. And I hope you have a good rest of your week. And hopefully I will see a bunch of you back on Friday when we vote on a new book. Have a good night, everyone.